Am I the a-hole for naming my Wi-Fi network after my neighbor's affair, so his wife would see it? The first sign something had gone sideways was Denise Okafor standing in my driveway at 7:40 on a Tuesday morning, still in her scrubs from a night shift, holding her phone up like it was Exhibit A in a trial only she knew was happening. "Explain this," she said. "No hello. No sorry to bother you." Just her phone screen, 3 inches from my face, open to her Wi-Fi settings. I didn't even need to look. I already knew what was on it, because I'd typed it myself 2 nights before, sitting at my kitchen table with a glass of wine I probably shouldn't have finished before making a decision like that. The network was called Gary fucked the yoga instructor _ ask 404. 404 is my house number. Gary is her husband. He lives at 402. "I can explain," I said, which is a sentence that has never once made anything better in the history of the English language. "Then explain," she said, and her voice cracked right down the middle of the word, explain. And that's the part one keep replaying, 3 weeks later, when people ask me if I regret it. Because I don't regret knowing what I knew. I regret being the one who made her find out like that, in a drop-down list of Wi-Fi networks, sandwiched between Netgear 58 and some kid's FBI surveillance van 3. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You need the backstory, or none of this makes sense, and half of Reddit is already going to tell me I'm the asshole without it. I'm Rosie. I'm 34. I work remote for a mid-sized logistics software company doing something in customer success that I still can't explain at parties without people's eyes glazing over. And I've lived at 404 Larkspur Court for 6 years. It's a cul-de-sac. 8 houses, all facing each other like we're perpetually mid-standoff, which, as it turns out, is thematically appropriate. Gary and Denise Okafor moved into 402 about 4 years ago. Gary's an insurance adjuster, mid-40s, drives a truck he keeps embarrassingly clean, and has this habit of narrating his own yard work out loud to nobody. Okay, gonna get this hedge nice and square now, like there's a documentary crew following him that only he can see. He's not a bad guy, by most accounts. Waves at everyone. Brought over a cake when my mom was in town for surgery recovery. Coaches a rec league softball team on Sundays. Denise is a night shift ICU nurse. Sharp, funny in a deadpan way that catches you off guard. The kind of person who will deliver devastating commentary about your life choices with a completely straight face and then ask if you want some of her banana bread. We're not best friends, but we're close enough that she's watered my plants when I traveled, and I've signed for her packages more times than I can count. She works 3 or 4 12-hour night shifts a week, sleeps during the day, and for a long stretch of time, that schedule is the entire reason this whole mess was even possible. Here's the part where I have to admit something that doesn't make me look great. I've known about Gary and the yoga instructor for almost 4 months before any of this came to a head. Her name's Sasha. Well, I'll call her Sasha, since this is already messy enough without dragging a real person's actual details into it. But you get the idea. She teaches at the studio 2 blocks from the cul-de-sac, the one with the too expensive smoothie counter. I go there. I've seen Gary's truck parked outside during Denise's night shifts more times than I want to admit I was keeping count of. The first time, I told myself it was nothing. Insurance adjusters go to yoga. Sure. Fine. The second time, I still told myself it could be nothing, though I was already lying to myself a little. By the 4th time, Gary's truck at 9 p.m. on a Wednesday, parked 2 spots down from Sasha's car, both of them walking out together laughing about something at 9:40, and getting into the passenger seat of her car instead of his own truck. I stopped pretending I didn't know what I was looking at. And here's my flaw, the one I already know people are going to hang me for. I didn't do anything about it for months. I told myself it wasn't my business. I told myself Denise and Gary's marriage was theirs to manage, that I was a neighbor, not a mediator, not a moral enforcement officer for Larkspur Court. I told myself a lot of things, honestly, because the truth is I didn't want the confrontation. I didn't want to be the person who blew up someone's marriage with a text message. I like being liked by both of them. That's not a virtue, by the way. That's cowardice with better lighting. What changed is Denise. About 6 weeks before the Wi-Fi thing, she started acting different. Coming over more, staying longer, asking questions that weren't really about small talk. Does Gary seem like he's around more or less to you lately? Has he mentioned anything about work stress? Fishing. In that careful way people fish when they already suspect the answer and are terrified of confirming it. I deflected every time. I told her work had been busy for me. I hadn't really noticed. The weather's been nice. Anything to not be the one who said the sentence out loud. Then, 3 weeks ago, she showed up at my door at 2 a.m., mid-shift break, mascara halfway down her face, and told me she'd found a receipt. Dinner for two, a restaurant across town. Time-stamped for a night Gary told her he was at a league meeting for softball. She didn't say the word affair. She just sat at my kitchen table and said, "I don't know what I'm looking at anymore." And I gave her tea and said something useless like, "Marriages go through phases," and I hated myself for it before I even finished the sentence. I want to be honest about something else here, because it matters for what comes later. I have my own baggage around this exact situation. My ex-husband cheated on me for the better part of a year before I found out. And I found out from a mutual friend who'd known for months and said nothing because she didn't want to get involved. I have never fully forgiven her for that silence, and some part of me, a part one didn't examine closely enough at the time, could not stand the idea of becoming her, of being the person who knew and said nothing and let Denise keep living inside a lie because it was easier for everyone except her. So when Denise left my kitchen that night still not knowing, still guessing, still blaming herself in that specific way betrayed people do even when they've done nothing wrong, I made a decision. Not a good one. Not a well-thought-out one. But a decision. I didn't march over and knock on Gary's door. I want that on the record, because a small, cowardly part of me still thinks that would have been the more honest move, and I didn't take it. Instead, 2 nights later, half a glass of wine in, staring at my router app because my internet had been glitching and I was renaming the network anyway. I typed Gary fucked the yoga instructor _ask 404 into the SSID field and hit save. My reasoning, at the time, felt airtight. Denise's phone auto-connects to open or nearby networks when she's on our street. She's mentioned it before, complained about her phone fighting with the neighborhood over signal. Our houses are close enough that our Wi-Fi ranges overlap by a lot. I can see 4 other networks from my kitchen most days. I figured she'd see it eventually, scrolling through her settings, and either she'd ask me directly, which would let me finally say what I'd been too chicken to say for months, or she'd draw her own conclusion. Either way, I told myself, the truth would find her without me having to be the one holding the knife. That's the story I told myself. In hindsight, it's a pretty flimsy piece of moral architecture. I wasn't just leaving a breadcrumb. I named it in full, house number included, practically daring anyone on the street to ask questions. That's not letting the truth find her. That's a billboard. It took 2 days. Tuesday morning, driveway, phone in my face. "Explain this," she said again, when I didn't answer fast enough the first time. "Okay," I said. "Can we go inside? Please." "No. Here's fine. Explain it here." Her voice had that flat, controlled quality I recognized from her retelling stories about the ICU. The tone people use when they're one wrong word away from coming apart completely, and they know it. "I've seen Gary's truck outside the yoga studio," I said. "More than once. Late at night, on your shift nights." I stopped. I didn't even know if I should use the name. "With who, Rosie?" "One of the instructors there. I don't know her well. I've just seen them leave together. More than once." Denise didn't say anything for a long moment. She was looking at her phone screen still, like the words on it might rearrange themselves into something less true if she stared hard enough. "How long have you known this?" she said. Not a question, really. A demand dressed as one. "A few months," I said, and watched her face do something I don't have a clean word for. Not quite a flinch, not quite a collapse, somewhere adjacent to both. "A few months," she repeated. "A few months, Rosie. You've watered my ferns. You had dinner at my table 3 weeks ago. You let me sit at your kitchen table at 2 in the morning crying about a receipt, and you said marriages go through phases to me. I didn't know how to. You didn't know how to tell me my husband was cheating on me, or you didn't know how to do it in a way that didn't make you look bad." She wasn't yelling. That was almost worse. She had the voice of someone delivering a diagnosis. "Because there's a version of this where you knock on my door in June and say, 'Hey, I think you should know something.' And there's a version where you rename your Wi-Fi, so I trip over it by accident 4 months later like it's some kind of scavenger hunt. Those are not the same thing. One of those is telling a friend the truth. The other one is a stunt." I panicked, I said, which was true, and also nowhere near a full accounting of what I'd done. "You panicked for 4 months, and then you panicked in a very specific and detailed way that required you to type a sentence into a router settings page," she said. "That's not panic. That's a decision. Just say you made a decision." I didn't have a comeback for that, because she was right, and I think some part of me had known she'd be right the moment I hit save on that network name, and felt a little thrill of righteousness that I now recognize as something closer to relief. Relief that I wasn't going to have to be the one who said the sentence out loud after all. "I'm sorry," I said. "I should have just told you directly. I was scared of how you'd react, and scared of being wrong, and I told myself this way you'd find out without me having to." "Without you having to what, Rosie? Be involved? You were already involved. You've been involved for months. You just didn't want to be responsible." She pocketed her phone. "I have to go tell my husband I know his Wi-Fi nickname before he figures out our neighbor did it instead of me finding a way to say it myself. Thanks for that too, by the way. I don't even get to choose how I confront him. You already wrote the headline." She walked back across the cul-de-sac to her own driveway, and I stood there in mine for probably 4 full minutes before I could make myself go back inside. And even then I just sat on my kitchen floor with my back against the cabinets for a while, which is not a place I usually choose to have my emotional reckonings, but that's where I ended up. By Thursday, the cul-de-sac group chat. Yes, we have one. It's called Larkspur Lane Neighbors, with the 2 exclamation points that nobody has ever explained, had gone from its usual content, lost cats, a warning about a raccoon, someone's Amazon package theft PSA, to an actual, sustained argument with people I hadn't heard from in months. It started innocuously. Carl from 406, who mostly uses the chat to complain about parking, posted, "Hey, has anyone else been getting weird Wi-Fi network names showing up? Mine's showing something wild LOL," which told me Gary had not, in fact, changed the network name yet, and everyone within range could still see it. Then Marisol from 408, who I like, genuinely. She brings me soup when I'm sick and once helped me jump my car at 6 a.m. Posted, Wait, what is going on with 402 and 404 flushed face? And that's when it stopped being deniable. Within an hour, half the street had chimed in. I'm going to give you the shape of it rather than every message, because honestly reliving the whole thread makes my stomach hurt. But the gist. Carl thought the whole thing was hilarious and kept posting laughing emojis until his wife apparently told him to stop, because his messages went from Elmdillo neighborhood drama to radio silence within the hour. Marisol took Denise's side immediately and completely, which I understood, but what stung was how fast she turned on me, specifically, not just the situation. Rosie, this is unhinged behavior TBH. If you knew something, you tell her to her face. You don't turn it into a whole public thing for the entire street to see. She wasn't wrong. It just landed harder coming from someone I considered a friend. Then there was Frank from 410, a retired guy who mostly uses the chat to remind everyone about leaf blower ordinances, who posted a message that somehow made things worse for everyone. Not to pile on, but I've seen that truck outside that studio too. Didn't think it was my business to say anything, which meant I wasn't even the only person who'd known and said nothing. There'd apparently been a whole informal, unspoken agreement among half the cul-de-sac to just quietly know and not say a word. And somehow I was the only one who'd broken it. Badly, in the worst possible way, and now I was catching all the heat that maybe should have been more evenly distributed. My sister Anjali, who I told about all of this over the phone that same night because I needed someone in my corner and clearly wasn't finding one on the group chat, had a much blunter take. You did the right thing telling her the truth eventually, and the wrong thing about literally every single detail of how you did it, she said. Also, why do you even still have a house number in your Wi-Fi name? Are you trying to get robbed? That's the aside I promised myself I wouldn't skip, because it's true to how these things actually go. While all of this was blowing up, I was also dealing with an unrelated crisis, which is that my dishwasher had chosen this exact week to die, flooding half my kitchen, and I spent 2 of the worst days of the whole ordeal on hold with a home warranty company arguing about whether a sudden mechanical failure counted as pre-existing damage, while simultaneously fielding text messages from people I hadn't spoken to in a year asking if it was true that the yoga lady from Larkspur was involved with someone married. Life doesn't pause the small, humiliating logistics of your existence just because the big, humiliating drama is happening. I want that on the record too. By Friday, Gary himself weighed in on the group chat, which nobody expected, least of all me. His message was short. I'd appreciate people not discussing my personal life in a group chat about lost cats. Some of you have known me for years. I would have hoped for better. No apology. No denial. Either, which everyone noticed. Just a redirection of the blame toward the group's behavior rather than his own. That message did something I didn't anticipate. It swung a little bit of sentiment back toward me, or at least away from full condemnation. Marisol posted, "Wait, so you're not denying it, you're just mad we're talking about it," and got zero response from Gary, which told its own story. Denise didn't post in the chat at all, the entire time. Not once. Which I understood. She had every reason not to want an audience for the worst week of her marriage. But her silence sat heavier than anything anyone else typed, because it meant I had no idea what she was thinking, whether she hated me, whether she and Gary were still under the same roof, whether any of this had actually helped her the way some cowardly part of me had told myself it would. My mother, when I called her mostly to vent about the dishwasher and accidentally ended up telling her everything else too, said the thing that actually stuck with me the most out of everyone. You wanted credit for telling the truth without the risk of actually being the one who told it, she said. That's not really honesty, Beta. That's honesty with an alibi. I didn't have anything to say back to that. Here's where it gets more complicated than a clean, cheating husband gets exposed story, and where I have to admit I didn't have the full picture even when I thought I did. The following Tuesday, exactly a week after the driveway confrontation, Denise showed up at my door again. Different energy this time. Not furious, just exhausted, carrying 2 mugs of something from her own kitchen because apparently she decided we were having this conversation whether I liked it or not, and she wasn't drinking my coffee to do it. I need to tell you something, and I need you to not interrupt me, she said, sitting down at my table like she owned it, which after 6 years of friendship, she basically did. She told me that after the driveway blow-up, she confronted Gary that same night. He didn't deny the affair. He'd apparently been trying to figure out how to end it for weeks and hadn't found the nerve, which, fine, join the club of people on this street who can't find their nerve. We could start a support group. But here's the piece I didn't have. Denise and Gary had been in a rough patch for close to 2 years before any of this, and it wasn't just a garden variety rough patch. They'd lost a pregnancy at 5 months, almost 3 years back, something Denise had never told me, something almost nobody on the street knew, and Gary had, in her words, checked out emotionally the day we left that hospital and never fully came back. She'd suggested counseling twice. He'd gone once and never returned. She'd thrown herself into work, picking up extra night shifts partly for the money and partly, she admitted, because the house felt unbearable when both of them were in it, and neither could talk about the thing that had actually broken something between them. I'm not saying that excuses what he did, she said. It doesn't. Nothing excuses it. But I need you to understand that this wasn't some happy marriage that a yoga instructor waltzed into and destroyed. This was already broken, in a way I hadn't even told my own sister about, and you found out about the symptom 4 months ago and decided you had the whole diagnosis. That landed harder than the driveway conversation had, honestly, because it reframed something I'd been quietly proud of. I told the truth. I broke the silence. I refused to be complicit. Into something much messier. I'd inserted myself into a story I only had 1 chapter of, and I'd done it in the most public, least controllable way available to me. She also told me something about Sasha, the instructor, that reframed things again. Sasha hadn't known Gary was married for the first several weeks. He'd apparently been cagey about it. No ring habit he'd started months earlier for reasons that had nothing to do with her. And by the time she found out, she'd already ended things with him once, only for him to talk his way back and claiming his marriage was basically already over. Denise had actually spoken to Sasha directly, one woman calling another, and come away angrier at Gary than at her. She thought she was seeing a separated guy easing back in a single life, Denise said. She wasn't the mastermind here. She was lied to too, just less catastrophically than I was. Which meant the version of the story I'd been operating on. Cheating husband, scheming other woman, blindsided wife, me as reluctant truth-teller, wasn't wrong exactly, but it was flatter than reality. The way these things always are once you actually sit with someone and let them talk for longer than a driveway confrontation allows. So why are you telling me all this now? I asked her. Because I've spent a week being furious at you for how you told me, and I needed you to understand it's not because you were wrong that I deserve to know, she said. It's because you decided you got to control the shape of how I found out, without asking me what I wanted, and that's a kind of power I never gave you. You took something that belonged to me, my own confrontation with my own husband, and you staged it for me in advance. Gary showed up at my house 2 days after that. I hadn't seen him since the group chat message, and when I opened the door and saw him standing there in his softball jersey, looking like he'd aged 5 years in a week, my first instinct was to apologize before he'd even said anything, which tells you something about how thoroughly the previous 10 days had worn me down. "Can I come in?" he said. Not aggressive. Flat, tired. "Sure," I said, and immediately regretted every part of that decision. He sat at the same kitchen table Denise had sat at twice now, which felt like it was becoming some kind of tribunal. "I'm not here to yell at you," he said. "I don't even think I have the right to be mad at you, honestly, given what I did. But I need to say some things, and I need you to actually hear them instead of just waiting for me to leave." "Okay," I said. "You've known for 4 months," he said. 4 months, Rosie. "And in that time, you had dinner with us. You watched our dog when we went to Denise's cousin's wedding. You let me help you jumpstart your car in February, and we stood in your driveway for 20 minutes talking about nothing, and the entire time you had this information, just sitting there. And instead of ever once saying anything to my face, or even to Denise's face, you waited until you'd had a glass of wine, and then you turned my own router into a public accusation with my house number attached, so that literally anyone within range, Carl, Marisol, that college kid who houses it for the Pattersons, could see it before my own wife did." "I know," I said. "I've had a lot of time to sit with how badly I handled the actual delivery of it." "That's the thing, though," Gary said. And here's where his voice did something unexpected, something that wasn't quite anger. "You keep saying you handled the delivery badly. Like the problem was logistics. Like if you just texted her instead of doing the Wi-Fi thing, this would all be fine. But the actual problem, Rosie, is that you decided you had the right to be the one who ended my marriage's version of privacy. Not the truth. The truth was always going to come out. I know that. I'm not blaming you for the truth. I'm asking why it had to be you, playing judge, with my house number in the header like you were serving me papers. Because I didn't think you were ever going to tell her," I said, and my voice came out sharper than I meant it to, some old anger from my own marriage bleeding into a conversation that wasn't really about that. "Because I've been Denise. I've been the person who found out from someone else, months after everyone around her already knew, and I watched every single person who knew and said nothing keep having dinner with my ex like nothing was wrong, and I promised myself I'd never be one of those people again. So yeah, maybe I didn't wait for you to grow a spine, Gary. Maybe I didn't trust you to actually tell her, because you'd already had months and you hadn't." Gary didn't say anything for a second. Something in his face shifted, not softened, exactly, but recalibrated. "That's fair," he said finally. "That part's fair. I was a coward about it for way too long. And if you'd never done anything, I don't know how much longer I would have kept lying. Maybe you're right that I never would have told her on my own. I think about that a lot, actually. Whether I would have just kept doing it, some version of it, indefinitely, if nobody had forced my hand. But," I said, because I could hear one coming. "But that doesn't mean it was yours to force," he said. "You didn't do it to protect Denise. If you wanted to protect Denise, you'd have told her directly, sat with her, let her decide what to do with the information on her own terms. What you did protected you. It let you feel like you'd done something without ever having to have the hard conversation yourself. You got to be the whistleblower without ever blowing the whistle to anyone's face. That's not bravery. I don't know what to call it, but it's not that. That one hit somewhere I didn't have a good defense for, mostly because it was uncomfortably close to what my sister and my mother had both already said in gentler ways. I'm not going to pretend what I did to Denise is anywhere close to being the same as what you did," Gary said, standing up. I broke something that was already breaking for reasons that have nothing to do with you. I'm not equating those things. I just need you to understand that you don't get to be the hero of this because you technically told the truth. You told the truth in the way that cost you the least. He left after that. Didn't slam the door, didn't raise his voice again, just left, and I sat at my kitchen table for a long time afterward turning that last sentence over. You told the truth in the way that cost you the least. I wanted to argue with it. I still kind of do. But I also can't fully make it not true. It's been 3 weeks now. Here's where things actually stand, no tidy bow on it. Gary moved out of 402 and into an extended stay place about 15 minutes away, not officially separated, according to Marisol, who somehow still knows everything happening on this street despite claiming she's staying out of it now, but not living there either. Denise still waves at me when she's out getting her mail, but it's a smaller wave than it used to be, the kind you give someone you're not sure you're still friends with, but haven't decided to formally not be friends with either. We haven't had another real conversation since the one at my kitchen table. I don't know if we will. The group chat has mostly gone quiet on the topic, though Carl still occasionally posts something that toes the line. Last week it was, "Hope everyone on the street is doing okay this month, folded hands," which everyone understood exactly what it was referencing and nobody responded to. Sasha, as far as I know, is no longer seeing Gary, though I only know that secondhand through Denise's one visit, and I have no way of confirming it and no plan to ask. My dishwasher, for the record, got fixed. The home warranty company eventually agreed it was mechanical failure, not pre-existing wear, and I want to say resolving that felt satisfying in a way nothing else about this month has. But honestly, even that came with an asterisk, because the technician who fixed it turned out to live 2 streets over and had, of course, already heard about the Wi-Fi thing from someone. I renamed my network back to something normal a few days after the driveway confrontation. Just my last name and 5G. Boring, forgettable. Exactly the kind of network name nobody has ever needed a group chat to discuss. I think about that sometimes, how easy it would have been to just be boring about the whole thing from the start. Tell Denise privately, quietly, the way you're supposed to tell someone something that's going to break their heart. I had that option the entire time. I chose the other one, and I still don't fully understand why. Except that some cowardly, self-protective part of me wanted the truth to come out without my fingerprints being the only ones on it. And instead my fingerprints ended up more visible than anyone else's. So AITA? I told a wife the truth about her husband's affair, eventually, after months of knowing and saying nothing. I also did it in a way that stripped her of the ability to find out on her own terms, turned it into cul-de-sac spectacle, and by multiple accounts, made a genuinely difficult, complicated situation between 2 people who were already struggling long before any yoga instructor entered the picture, even harder for them to work through privately. Gary cheated. That's not in question, and nothing that follows is meant to excuse it. But I keep getting told, by nearly everyone in my life, that the way I told the truth matters just as much as the fact that I told it at all, and I still can't decide if that's a fair standard or just a convenient way for everyone to make me the villain in a story where I wasn't even the one who did the actual betraying. I don't know. I genuinely don't know anymore. I've replayed the driveway conversation probably 200 times, and I still can't tell you with a straight face whether I'd do it differently if I could go back, or just do it differently and still feel like I got there in the end. Edit. A few people in the comments asked if Denise and I have talked since, and I wanted to add something because it happened literally last night, and I'm still processing it. She texted me, First time she's initiated contact since the kitchen table conversation, and it was just one line. Found out today he'd been telling people at his softball league we were on a break for like a year before any of this. Guess I wasn't the only one who didn't have the full picture. No follow-up. No, let's talk. Just that, sitting in my phone since 9 p.m., and I still haven't figured out how to respond to it. Or whether she wants me to respond at all, or whether she just needed to tell someone, and I happened to be the person on the other end of the last text thread she still had open. Make of that what you will. I have no idea what it means for whatever's left between us, if anything is.